First of all, the wearing of mask. Now, whilst in the meeting room, only remove your mask if you're asked to speak. Otherwise, please continue to wear your mask. Now, there are no planned fire alarm tests today, and if you hear the fire alarms, please leave by the nearest fire exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is the St John Churchyard off Jewett Street. Council security staff will be available to direct you as required. The public toilets are located off the main reception area. There's a refreshment machine for members of the public in the waiting area outside this meeting room. Finally, please switch your mobile phones on to silence whilst in the meeting room. This meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph or tweet a public proceeding of the meeting. I'll simply ask you, please be considerate towards other people in the room and take care not to disturb the proceeding. And if you are filming the meeting, please do not film the audience. The code for accessing the Council's Wi-Fi, it's FR33 Wi-Fi followed by an exclamation mark. During the meeting, members of the committee will not access the internet except as it relates to the official business of the meeting, send or receive emails, text message, or tweet the matters concerning this meeting. I'll now start the meeting formally with item 1, and those are apologies. I have a few apologies with current circumstances. So apologies from Councillor James Caldwell, Kath Williams, and Cleo Soames, and of course, Dan Whitehead. Pardon?
Kath Wilson, not Kath Williams.
Did I say Witham? Oh, Whitsom, indeed. Thank you, Councillor Damon O'Brien. It's not a problem. It's quite all right. And they are ably reserved by Councillor Nick Johnson, Councillor Margie Newens, and of course, John Hartley. I got it. Thank you, and welcome to you all for those who are reserving tonight. Thank you so much. I move on to item 2, confirmation of voting members. Please, for voting members, indicate by raising your hands. Thank you very much. We run to item 3, notification of any item of business which the chair deems urgent, and members, you should have on your desk the members' pack and, of course, the addendum, late observations. Can you confirm receipt? You've got them on your desk. Great. Thank you very much. I move on to item 4. This is disclosure of interest and dispensation. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensation in respect of any item or issue to be considered at this meeting? Are there any declarations? Councillor Williams.
Chair, 6.1 is in my ward.
Duly noted. I'll make a non-pecuniary declaration that item 6.2, Burgess Park, just happens to be my local park. I should mention that as a matter for the record here. Are there any other declarations? Very good. I now move on to item 5, and these are minutes of our previous meetings. Can the committee approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 30th of November? Agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I now move on to item 6, which is the development management. Now, the next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications. I would like to remind everyone of the committee's guidance and conduct of business. Officers will present the report, outline their recommendations, and answer questions raised by the committee. If present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. A spokesperson representing any objector to the application, and ideally by now you need to identify a single spokesperson if more than one objector wishes to speak, and the time will then be divided accordingly within the 3 minutes time slot. They're followed by the applicants or their agents. Indeed, they're followed by a spokesperson representing any supporter of the application who live within 100 metres of the development site. Last but not least, a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. Now, ward members in attendance and those nominated to speak on behalf of objectors, supporters, applicants to sit in the front row of the public gallery, and this is purely for easy communication between the committee and the speakers, in case any issue needs to be clarified later in proceedings. And of course, it would not be an opportunity to take part in the debate of the committee. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal, should avoid repeating information which is already in the report, and of course the meeting is not a hearing where all participants present their evidence to be cross-examined by other participants. At the end of each representation, the committee may ask questions of the presenter, and speakers should ideally leave the committee on subjects which would welcome further questioning. After receiving all submissions, the committee will debate the application and consider the officer's recommendations. This is a council committee meeting which is open to the public, and of course there should be no interruptions from members of the public. Finally, I would like everyone present to know that although the planning committee comprises members of different political parties, we are not politically whipped, are we? Okay. Our decisions are made in accordance with the Council's planning policy and based on the information contained in the relevant reports, and based upon the information contained in the reports together with the consultation responses and any verbal submissions made today. How we approach this application is set out in the Development Management Report in item 5, and if members are happy to note that report, I will move to considering the planning applications. Are you content, members? Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll now move on to item 6.1, which is Planning Ref 19 AP 4455 Rotherhithe New Road. And that's, of course, London SE 16 2PS. Now, I've got to make this announcement that following consultation with officers, I would like to inform the panel that the item is to be deferred to a later date, and hopefully the report that we previously received will be fully consulted and other items resolved. Are you happy that we defer this item? And I'll do it by nomination. I'm happy to propose the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Williams, I'd like to move to the vote. I'm happy, unless the legal officer says otherwise, to show by show of hands. Show of hands, please indicate if you're happy. Thank you. The item is now deferred. Thank you. I'll now move on to item 6.2, which is Planning Ref 21 AP 0451, address 1 to 13 Southampton Way, that is Southwark SE5 7SW. Can I invite the officer presenting the report, first of all, to introduce himself, and you may begin your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Colin Wilson, and I'll present the scheme tonight. The address, as you say, 1 to 13 Southampton Way. The proposal is to redevelop the site for 32 new homes, which would be 100% affordable, and the split on the homes would be, in terms of tenure, 25.5% social rent and 74.5% intermediate. The building would range in height from 7 to 3 stories. There would be the provision of 424 square metres of park space, in effect gifted to Burgess Park from the current site. And there would be a small commercial flexible space on the site at ground floor at about 102 square metres. This is the map of the site, just to the south of Burgess Park, which you can see on the left of the image there, with the north point heading to the top of the page. This is an aerial photo of the site. The site is currently occupied by Steptoes and Sons. 1 to 11 is a bric-a-brac and salvage business. And number 13, where you can see the cars parked in the yard space, is a car wash. This is a photo of the existing site. One of the things to note, particularly in relation to the Metropolitan Open Land, is the relatively low-lying nature of the existing development on the site. Just over a story, basically, of various buildings built up over the years. Public consultation response. There was a lot of public consultation response. In summary in the report, it refers to 475 objections at the time the report was completed, and 142 people in support of the scheme. But I would like to point to the addendum, which identifies a list of objections we received from the Burgess Park Action Group, and that was comprising 3,973 signatures in objection to the scheme. And in addition, this afternoon, we also received an email from Katrina Sinclair from Friends of Burgess Park, who I believe are here tonight, and Katrina identified that she wished to share their views objecting to the scheme in respect of the substantial harm to the openness of the metropolitan open land. The public consultation responses, as you can see summarised in the main report, relate to the metropolitan open land, harm to the openness of that, the entrance to Burgess Park, the harm to land within Burgess Park, design, including height, mass and scale, impact on residents' amenity, the density being too high and this being overdevelopment, overshadowing in Burgess Park, impacts on ecology, increased traffic in the area, overlooking, inadequate parking provision, and the impact on the climate of the development in itself, and the point that it should be part of the park and planted rather than development site. The existing land use I've touched on. It's just over 500 square metres of commercial use, and the change is to more or less entirely residential, but with some small commercial use provided on the site. And the addition of just over 400 square metres of open space. And if you look at the plan on the site and in your members pack, on the top of that image you can see a red dotted line, which is the dotted line of the existing car wash, which you saw earlier, which had the cars parked into it. So part of the proposal from the applicant is that that part of the site is gifted to the council and becomes part of Burgess Park and the metropolitan open land, and the applicant also pays for the landscaping and remediation of the site. So the site has been a scrapyard. We anticipate that people have been dumping oil and all sorts of stuff on the site, so it probably would require quite a bit of remediation. This is an image of the scheme looking along Southampton Way towards the entrance to the park. The historic three-storey Victorian terraces are visible on the right, and then the building rises to 4 stories, 5 stories, and then 7 stories. And if you look onto the side of the road where the existing housing, relatively recent housing, has been built, that's at 7 stories. So the 7 stories is no higher than the building opposite, which has been completed. And this is a CGI of the entrance to the park. Again, if you bear in mind the image of the existing buildings on the site, they are very low range, and that's a key part of the issue about openness, and clearly this has, we feel, a significant impact on that openness by dint of its scale. Similar issue here, the point looking back towards the entrance to the park. So this is looking towards Southampton Way from within the park. The building just beyond the building closest to you in the view is the existing 7-storey building. This is a bit closer, so in perspective looks slightly taller. And again, a further view highlighting the material finish. Our view is that in terms of design, considered in it on itself, this is a well-designed building, both the interior and exterior. Good quality detailing, brickwork, amenity space, and a very high dual aspect because the plan is relatively small. And to the left, in effect to the left of this picture is the kind of new park space. At the moment that's all fenced in and it's part of the car wash. And this is an aerial view illustrating that range, 3 stories to the park, and then right 4, 5 and 7 as it goes across the page. And a further aerial view. The grey building opposite is the building that's already there, of the same number of stories. I mentioned the 424 square metres gain in public open space to that finger of the site that moves into the park at the moment. There are 4 trees on the site at the moment. They would be kept with the exception of one tree, which is an invasive species, which is a Buddleia davidi, I believe. So there would be little change there, and as I say, the applicant was committed to planting the gifted park space, if you like. There is play space on the site. It's not meeting GLA London plan standards in terms of play space. There is a requirement for about 140 square metres of play space, and this provides 60, just under 70 square metres. There would be an offset payment for that, but in the report we identify that we feel that that's acceptable because of the proximity of the park and the gifting of the 424 square metres to the park. So obviously it's a judgment call on a balance of benefits and costs that the scheme is bringing forward. And here's a proposed landscaping plan. It's not been agreed in detail, so the applicant has committed to that being secured by condition. So you'll notice in the report we don't identify how many trees will be provided there. That would be subject, had it been recommended for approval, to a discussion with our urban forester and our ecologist. Also worth noting, in terms of impact on ecology and on overshadowing, objections have been raised in respect of that, but our ecology officer feels that the impact of overshadowing would largely be transient and so wouldn't be significant. And obviously there's virtually no ecological value on the site at present, so there would be potential gains from the return of part of the site to a park. The following two images show permanent overshadowing. So this isn't showing the transient overshadowing. So where you get the darker kind of, it's hard to detect. But if you look at the kind of rear wings of the existing Victorian buildings, you can see where the shadowing goes slightly darker. That's where you get permanent shadowing. So what this is showing is there isn't a great deal of permanent shadowing caused by this building, and that kind of fits in with the views from our ecology officer that the impacts on the park ecology are not that great. In terms of neighbouring amenity, there are some impacts in terms of BRE guidelines, and they are on Ayres Court and Hambling Court. So if you look at the building in blue, to the top of the page is Hambling Court in the middle. The building on the right of that image, it says Hogan Court, it's actually Ayres Court. A lot of the impacts that are caused in terms of the BRE guidance, in terms of VSC, for instance, are caused by the existing balconies on those buildings. So where you can see the balconies on Hambling Court, where the balconies kind of oversail rooms below them, they are already limiting daylight sunlight into those spaces. So the majority of the rooms in neighbouring buildings do pass the tests. There are some losses, but they're within the guidance, within BRE guidelines. There are some rooms that go over the BRE guidance, but by and large that's caused, as I said, by the existing balconies that are located above windows in some of those new flats. And overall, we feel that the impact on daylight sunlight is acceptable. This just shows the face-to-face distances between the new building and Hambling Court and Ayres Court opposite. So they're over 15 metres across the street, and our guidance says they should be over 12.5 metres. So they pass that front-to-front distance, typical of many streets in Southwark, I suppose. And in terms of energy efficiency measures, the building is highly insulated and sealed from the air. The aspiration is to connect to cell chip, and once that cell chip connection had been achieved, then the carbon savings would be 93%. But if you look at the reports, that is dependent on that cell chip connection being made. That provision though is made within the building to use that heat from the cell chip network, and obviously we are progressing that in this area with Veolia, and the idea is to connect to our nearby council estates as their boilers are switched off. Touching on the ground floor plan, the commercial units is to the left of this image, so it could be a small cafe on the park. There's a community room rather, indicated at the back, so that would be a space that the local community could use should they wish to. It's a flexible space, and ultimately its use would to be determined. But the idea is it's a small commercial use next to the park. The other things you can see there are obviously the bike store. There's also the disabled parking provision, which is on the right of the image. The children's play space is at the rear. And if I go on to typical upper floor plan, the relative small scale of the plan means you get this very high dual aspect and in some cases triple aspect provision. And obviously you get a fantastic outlook from some of these places over into the park. In addition, as you go up the building, as you get to the 5th floor, there would be roof terraces. So there's also communal space, and that's where the communal space is largely provided within these roof terraces. And again, they get great sunlight and also outlook into the park. Just summing up, some further images of the elevations, predominantly brick, recessed windows to give a depth and quality to the facade. Different colourings of the bricks to somewhat break up the height, mass and bulk. Again, kind of repeating on the northeast elevation, the balconies, some projecting, some kind of within the body of the building, but very generously sized balconies overall as well. So good private amenity space provision within the scheme. And to conclude, obviously we have acknowledged in the report that the scheme does deliver public benefits, and one of the things that we're required to consider by national guidance is if in building on previously developed metropolitan open land, would that be meeting a identified need for affordable housing? There is certainly an identified need for affordable housing in Southwark. But even if there is that need, you still have to consider primarily what the impact on the openness of metropolitan open land would be. So even with that affordable housing and the gifting of land to Burgess Park and its landscaping, and an increase in ecological benefit that would arise from that, we still feel as officers that because of the scale of the building, it would have and its location, it would have an unacceptable impact on the openness of the MOL when you compare the existing low-rise buildings with a 7-storey, 5-storey, and 4- and 3-storey building. And for that reason, we are recommending that committee refuse this scheme planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. Are there questions from the committee to Colin at this stage? Councillor Livingstone.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, as just to understand the report. Paragraph 8, the planning summary tables. It suggests there are going to be a total of 6 socially rented homes, 24 intermediate homes. Those being the total homes, so they're coming to a total of 32. There seem to be 2 homes either missing or too many in the total. So just wondering why those figures don't quite add up. So it's paragraph 8. There's a table there. 6 plus 24 equals 30. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Livingstone.
I've got a second question, which is really just to understand this point on MOL, because obviously this is land that at the moment is brownfield, no green space in it whatsoever, and there would be under this proposal. And just to really understand, perhaps a question for John as the legal officer, just really to understand, Colin has already outlined this to some extent, but that weighting around MOL, where if this site wasn't within MOL, I would expect that officers would be recommending approval for this. And so it's really just to understand the weighting around MOL when there's no green space actually being lost as part of this development.
Thank you for that, Councillor. It is covered off in paragraphs 35 and 36 of the report, this issue, and the fact that there's development taking place, that means that there is, in accordance with the MPPF, that is by its very self, means that it's inappropriate because there is harm to the openness. And that's assessed in paragraphs 35 and 36. And therefore the starting point, and this is paragraph 149 of the MPPF, the starting point is that it really does need to fall into one of the exceptions that are listed in paragraph 149. If it doesn't fall within one of those exceptions, and the argument in the report is that it doesn't, then you've got to look at the benefits of the scheme, and they've got to be very exceptional for you to consider that is acceptable to the committee. So there is a planning balance to be had. You know that the development is inappropriate. You know there's harm to the openness, and you have to, because you don't have one of the exceptions that are outlined at paragraph 36, which repeats paragraph 149 of the MPPF, you've therefore got to look at the planning balance and decide whether or not there are these exceptional circumstances, which would essentially mean the benefits. You may want to refer to me later in the meeting as to whether or not the benefits that are being offered, i.e. the affordable housing, whether that could be sufficient. And I think it depends a little bit on the discussion which takes place, but you may want further clarity later in the meeting about whether or not those benefits could be sufficient.
And it pivots on paragraph 36 point G, doesn't it, as I understand it, about whether we could deem it would fit that test, and that feels to me as if it's the pivotal question for us to be considering this evening.
I don't think it. Yes, you've got to look at paragraph G and take that into account. I think that's absolutely right. You've looked to the right place there. Thank you, Councillor.
And just on that point, at the end of 36G, it does say contribute to meeting an identified affordable housing need within the area of the local planning authority, but the precursor to that part of that is not cause substantial harm to the openness of the green belt. So even if you meet an identified need for affordable housing, the test is still, are you causing substantial harm to the openness of the green belt? And our case is that we feel that this would be doing that. In terms of paragraph 8, where it says affordable intermediate homes, there are 8 one-beds and there are 18 two-beds, and that adds up to 26, not 24. So that is a mistake in the report, but everything else adds up.
Thank you. I want to move on now. There was another question we could ask of the applicant, but if I can now move on to the objectors, and if I may, first of all, just say that this meeting is being live streamed, and a recording will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. When introducing yourself, the objectors, I'll ask you first of all to give your names, your block, but not the exact address. So first of all, is there objectors in the room, first of all? Oh, there are a few. Who's the spokesperson to be speaking? Please come forward in that case. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you first of all to introduce yourself. The organisation or your address will be useful. And once you've done that, I'll give you 3 minutes. At 30 seconds, I'll indicate there's 30 seconds remaining. There's a little button on your microphone there. It should be an obvious one, I'm told. Right, there you are. There you are. That's the one. Yep. That's right. If you could introduce yourself, you can take off your mask.
Okay, thank you. I'm Susan Crisp, and I'm here on behalf of the Friends of Burgess Park. I also live fairly locally, and with me I have other objectors who are from Friends of Burgess Park, Wellsway Triangle, Residents Association and Camberwell Fields Residents Association. And I'd like to also give apologies from Donica McCarthy from the Burgess Park Action Group, who unfortunately is now positive for COVID, so isn't able to come to the meeting.
I'm going to ask you, please, maybe you could move your microphones closer to you. You've got a lovely song. Okay, you may begin your presentation now.
Thanks. We support the recommendation to refuse planning permission because of the impact on metropolitan open land. This building will harm the openness of Burgess Park. London Plan recognises the importance of preserving and enhancing green space in the policies about making the best use of land and policies for a healthy city. The new Southwark Plan includes the strategic target to retain all metropolitan open land. MOL needs to be protected, especially in areas of development pressure. These sites are of strategic importance to London and perform a valuable function, providing a clear break in the urban fabric and contributing to the character of London. This includes the aspects of openness. The building height is almost 29 metres, slightly taller than the Ayres Court block of flats opposite. This new development right beside the park intrudes through both height and bulk. The sunlight and shadow illustrations show the dominant impact of the shadow across the park, but the building itself will be there as a permanent presence. When looking at Burgess Park in the round, the importance of openness is a broader concept than the impact on the immediate views beside the development. It includes the wider landscape, long views, and the essential qualities of a park, which includes the sky. The council has invested millions of pounds in Burgess Park, including recent land acquisitions. It is a long-term project, well over 60 years in the making. Since the 1990s, local residents have campaigned for Burgess Park, securing MOL status and preventing sell-offs. Local groups support the council's original 2014 agreed intention to complete the Camberwell end of the park and negotiate to incorporate this site. This site is currently not green. It can be made green. The long-term intention is illustrated by the land designation as MOL in the new Southwark Plan, the Core Plan and the Burgess Park Master Plan. The whole site is shown as parkland. A petition of almost 4,000 signatures has been sent in, and objections to the planning portal on the planning portal include community groups like Burgess Park Action Group, Walworth Society, Camberwell Fields, Wellsway Triangle, Friends of Burgess Park and other groups. This part of Southwark has low levels of green space per person.
30 seconds.
Significant development around the park increases demand for quality green space. A corresponding increase in the size of the park is a vital step balancing urban densification. There are a couple of additional points of information to the committee report where we would welcome questions. Light pollution. The assumption is that all properties will have curtains and use them. Daylight and sunlight. Over a third of neighbours' windows are impacted. Design. 3 bedrooms do not meet Southwark's 2015
Your time is up. Your time is up.
residential design standards.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Is there anything else you would like the committee to know?
So the design, 3 bedrooms do not meet Southwark's 2015 residential design standards. Poorer air quality due to the canyon effect on Southampton Way, and concerns were raised about the automatic supportive comments which was previously raised and referred to the council. So I can go on now to give further information on the light pollution. The building will cause light pollution more than the existing activity, and it will cast light further and increase the light. The consultant's report makes the assumption of drawn curtains in accessing the light pollution. There is a second scenario with some windows with and without drawn curtains. The importance of darkness and nighttime for wildlife and people is becoming more recognised. Curtains therefore need to be provided if this is approved. The issue of sound pollution is not addressed, and this will likely increase with anticipated ground floor use of the occupation. The illustration shows a cafe. The ecologist's letter says that this will not be open in the evening. Would that be a planning condition? The balconies mentioned by Colin also impact on sound and light. Daylight and sunlight, Ayres Court, just over half of the windows comply. 20 meet the BRE standard and 18 do not. Hamlin Court, over 1/3 have loss of light. The VCSE says 60% and NSL 67%. So that means there is quite a lot of loss. They have large north-facing windows set back behind balconies, and this is generally a planning requirement. The play space will also be in the shade. The design standards do not meet the 2015.
What I'm going to do, Susan, because there's a lot there, I'm going to invite colleagues to ask questions, those quite very specific questions of you, and that way we'll obtain that information. Councillor Livingstone.
Thank you. I did have a very specific question, which was, you mentioned something about 3 bedrooms and failing to meet the design standards. It might have been what you were just about to come on to talk about, but for me, I wanted to understand that point.
So the 3-bedroom properties do not comply with the supplementary planning document 2015 technical update to the residential design standards, which says that dwellings with 3 or more bedrooms should have a second WC with a hand wash basin. None do. All affordable dwellings with 3 or more bedrooms should have a kitchen that is separate from the living room. The layout plans for the 3-bedroom flats are ambiguous. 2 of the designs show what looks like open plan living, dining, kitchen spaces and are labelled as such. All of the bathrooms in the flats are without windows.
Further questions? Councillor Newlands.
Thank you very much. You mentioned, I think, I may have misunderstood, but there'd been automatic approval of is that sort of in terms of
Support?
support, automatic, yes. Could you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yes. There were concerns raised earlier in the consultation about inaccurate Facebook posts and a website that automatically directed supportive comments to the council portal. These were challenged by local people and reported to the council. The council responded promptly to this complaint. We seek assurances that officers did take out the supporting comments from the information presented in the report. And the report didn't mention the petition, but obviously it was mentioned by Colin just now.
Thank you.
Is that enough? I don't want to sort of go over that unless there's more questions. I don't know if Colin might want to say something about that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I'm not personally aware that there was a website directing people in a particular direction.
It was called Southampton Way Support.
Right.
And does somebody else want to just provide a bit more information? I'm sorry, I don't have this at my fingertips. But anyway, the issue was that there was a website which automatically referred. People then showed their support, and then those comments were sort of harvested and put onto the council website. And that was my understanding of it. Although there was some sort of technical points about GDPR and personal information, etc., which I gloss over as I do not know half the full details. But it was reported through to the council, and the council acted promptly at the time.
That's fair enough. It wasn't brought to my attention, but I'm satisfied. If you're satisfied it was dealt with, that's fair enough. Are there further questions to Susan at this stage? In that case, Susan.
Can I just clarify? I think
Oh.
the question is we're not, we would seek assurances that those positive comments were excluded from the positive comments shown in the committee report. That's the query.
As I said, I wasn't aware of it, so switch off your mic for a moment, Susan. So I wasn't aware of it, so maybe Connie can comment.
Yes, I mean, if you just give me an opportunity to look at that part of the report, just check whether or not we actually acknowledge that explicitly, and you say that we did contact you and confirm that we had done something about that. Right. Okay. If just give me a moment just to check back on that. Thank you.
We can always return to that. Councillor Newland, do you have a questions?
So I was actually going to ask exactly whether because there's a table in here where it gives the positive comments and the negative comments, and that's exactly what I was going to ask actually, whether they were included in the positives. So thank you.
Thank you Councillor Johnson, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Susan's presentation has actually inspired me to ask a question of Colin, if I may.
No, if we could direct it to Susan from now, I will return to Colin.
I will return in that case.
If you don't mind. Sorry, in that case, and Susan, thank you very much. Stay handy, we'll require you later on. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. If I may now move on to the applicant or applicant agent in the room. Can I double check there's one? Right. Good evening. What I'm going to do is ask you first of all just to confirm your name and organisation. Once you've done that, I'll then invite you to begin your presentation. It'll be for 3 minutes. At 30 seconds, I'll indicate there's 30 seconds remaining. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name's Tim Gaskell. I'm here from CMA Planning. We're the planning consultants. I'm here on behalf of the applicants, Burlington Developments, who are here with the architects behind me.
Thank you. Please begin your presentation.
Thank you. Chair, members. For us, this is really a case of what you want to see. The site as it exists today, or a new development, delivering many benefits for the area. Let's start with the site as existing. It is MOL, but it is polluted, oil-soaked, rubbish-covered, an environmental disaster of a site. It brings down the area, and it brings down this part of Burgess Park. The site has a negative impact on the appearance of the area and the park. Touching on one of the questions from earlier, the site is MOL, but it is brownfield. It's not greenfield site. It has 100% coverage with buildings and hard standing. It is in private ownership and commercial use, and always has been. It is not designated open space, nor part of Burgess Park. One might ask, should this site even be MOL? Our proposal, as officers set out, is to clean the site up and decontaminate it. We would then give 1/3 of the site to the council to be incorporated into the park. I'm not aware of any developments that have given away 1/3 of their site in this way. And this would not be some semi-privatised public realm. This would be given to the council, rewilded, and be providing a major environmental benefit. This would be at the applicant's expense. There would be a significant enhancement to the site's ecology and biodiversity value, working alongside the work the council have done on Burgess Park. Clearly, we need some housing to allow us to do this, but we are providing 100% affordable homes for the benefit of those in need of housing, designed with Hexagon Housing Association's involvement at the outset. We'd provide a new cafe community space, which would support the park usage with facilities for cyclists. The scheme would provide an active and passive surveillance at this entrance to the park, addressing a known perception of antisocial behaviour at the point. The application is unfortunately recommended for refusal, but we've worked hard with officers and we are grateful to them for producing a balanced report. Officers note that the scale, massing and design of the proposal is acceptable in streetscape terms. They note that the quality of accommodation is considered to be high, 94% dual aspect. They set out that a proposal will provide a high level of carbon savings, and the design is supported with strong townscape features and a material choice that responds to context. Officers note there's no impact or significant impact on the setting of the conservation area on listed buildings, and on ecology, officers note that the impacts on Burgess Park are low. while the proposal offers the potential for significant ecological gain through
30
landscape.
seconds.
All positive. So the proposal is taller than the current buildings, clearly, but that does not in itself mean the proposal causes substantial harm to the openness of the ML, which you highlighted in your questions as being the key test. Being taller or more visible is not the issue. You need to decide if there's substantial harm. We do not believe this is the case, and if there is some harm, we consider that these benefits, exceptional benefits, easily outweigh this. So it is MOL, it is a difficult site to develop.
Your time's up. Thank you. Questions, committee members? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Tim. If you believe in the merits of this application, and you surely do, why did you harvest those positive comments in the way that we've just heard?
So those, I'm not sure I'd use the word harvesting. We have undertaken a whole series of consultation throughout the exercise, and as we came into submitting the application, we had a website with details for people to learn about that. People could make comments. Those comments were then sent on to the council. They weren't altered or changed in any way. Now, there was a concern raised by local residents about the GDPR. Forgive me if I've got that the wrong way around. I'm not an expert on that, so I'm not in a position to sort of comment on the merits of that. We took advice. We felt that what we'd done was correct, but nonetheless, the council, the officers said that it would be better if all comments previously issued were withdrawn from consideration, and then we asked, those people who'd made those comments were asked to reissue those comments direct to the council. From my conversations with the case officer, that is exactly what happened. Because we don't believe we did anything wrong, but a concern was raised. Officers asked us to make change the approach, change the website. We did exactly what they asked for straight away. And as far as I'm aware, those previously harvested, to use the phrase, comments weren't then considered any further.
Back. Did you push through the negative comments or just the positive comments?
My understanding is we pushed through all of the comments.
Thank you.
In that case, I might ask a few questions just so that we can move this discussion along. Of course, the recommendation for refusal is really set out in paragraph 36 of the report. Okay. I've listened carefully to what you've said in terms of the benefit of the schemes, but of course, the other test which I understand that might apply, particularly as it's 100% affordable under normal circumstances, as you know, we would be wanting these homes. But the site is completely in metropolitan open land. That's where it's founded. Okay. Therefore, there are other criteria that apply. Okay. So in paragraph 36, do you recognise the criteria that we are swayed by in making our decisions? And the most important one, of course, is whether or not homes will be built on metropolitan open land, and what is the backdrop that a local authority might be compelled to accept homes on metropolitan open land. Do you appreciate that backdrop? That's my first question. You respond to that, and we can take the conversation further.
There's some feedback before, maybe. Maybe this is better. I don't have that lovely soft voice, I'm afraid. Yes, I do. And, I'm obviously a planner, and, I recognise the tests that the officers have gone through to get to this point. And whilst we disagree with the recommendation, it is a fair report, and it's well structured and put together, and it does come down to that test. And as I say, when I was saying earlier, it's that question of substantial harm to the openness. Now, our view is obviously that we don't believe there's substantial harm to the openness, but even if there is, you could still take the view that the benefits outweigh that. But that is a question, obviously I've set out my position, but that is a question for the decision maker. It is a difficult site. I mean, we don't deal with MOL applications very often. In fact, this is, I can't remember the last time I ever did one. So I appreciate it's unusual, and it's not a straightforward question of affordable homes. Tick, off you go. There's a difficult balancing act for this.
So just to be clear then, so you are accepting then that it would not be normal practice to build homes on metropolitan open land?
Homes, no. Affordable homes is a different category because it obviously falls into that exception. But I think...
If I may then, that's fine. I just want to make sure, I want to make sure keep our conversation flowing.
Sure.
So my follow-up question to that, the usual requirement for local authorities is that if a local authority has not met its housing targets, okay, I believe, and I'll check with officers later on, that Southwark is meeting its housing target. In fact, it's got one of the most ambitious housing targets in the country, okay, with 11,000 new council homes. So with that backdrop, why would you make an application when you have an authority which has a very aggressive approach to building homes, to propose to build homes on what we would see as being metropolitan open land, and unless we've given good reason to give permission, we'll be truly challenged to make such a decision. Why would you proceed with the application? I wondered this prior to this meeting, and this is my first occasion to ask that question of you. Go ahead.
I think there's two parts to the answer, and the first part, and you might not be surprised for me to say this, is that the need for homes in London is great, and the emphasis on increasing delivery above and beyond targets. So yes, whilst the borough is to be commended for the house building programme it has, there is always potential for delivering more. And given housing need, I think that's a key part. But I wouldn't, in terms of why we put the application forward, it isn't just about delivering affordable homes. It comes back to my starting point, which is, when we talk about metropolitan open land, the first thing that springs into people's minds is something that's green, to be frank, a green field or a green park or a bit of woodland. This site isn't any of those. This is an eyesore of a site. So, our view is that actually something should happen on this site, something needs to happen on this site. And you have here a proposal where you're giving a third of it back to the park. That in itself is an exceptional benefit. So, the homes point is an important one, obviously, but it's not the only part of why we brought forward this application.
Understood. Can you just turn your mic just for the purpose of this conversation? I want to make sure, and there's others listening here, and I want to make sure that in terms of our decision making, members are clear what the NPPF says, and it's been referred to paragraph 149, outlined that there are potential exceptional exceptions to the provision of new buildings as inappropriate on green belt. The exceptions are as follows: buildings for agriculture and forestry, the provision of appropriate facilities in connection with existing use of land or change of use for outdoor sports, outdoor recreation, cemeteries, burial grounds, allotments, facilities preserves the openness of the green belt and not to conflict with the purpose of including land within it. It goes on to say here, extension or alteration of a building provided it does not result in a disproportionate addition over and above the size of the original building, which this clearly does. The replacement of a building provided a new building in the same use and not materially larger than the one it replaces. This clearly does. Another exception, limited infilling in villages, limited affordable housing for local community needs under policies set out in the development plan, including policies for rural exception sites, and it goes on to say, and this is the important part of this for Southwark, of course, that Southwark has already got a very clear house building programme, of which we are on target. Okay, so, and G, and goes back to Councillor Livingston's earlier point, G, limited infilling or the partial or complete development of previously developed land, whether redundant or in continuing use, excluding temporary building, which would not have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt than the existing development. this clearly is a significant step change to what we have there, which is low-rise buildings. You're proposing a five-story building. Okay. And I could go on, but that's the context in which our decisions will be made. And you're familiar with this, of course. And I'd still go back to my earlier question as to why you proceeded with the application in the form which you have, and not sort of propose low-rise buildings in line with what is currently presently there, and thereby potentially comply with the criteria, with the requirements of the NPPF.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, obviously, paragraph 149 is the key test that you yourselves as decision makers need to tackle. For us, I think it's part G of that, which is paragraph 36 of your reports. And you've got the first bit, which you obviously read out, and the second part, greater impact on the openness, under that first bullet point. And there's an or there. So, it's really, proposals can do either or. So for us, we're putting this forward very much on the basis of the second bullet point, and that is, does not cause substantial harm to the openness of the greenbelt. So my reading of that is that it could be bigger than it is at the moment. It could be a different shape. It's a question of whether that causes not just harm, but substantial harm. Now, it's quite, as I said earlier, you're quite entitled to come to a view on that as to whether that harm is substantial. Officers have done that test and they've gone through there. It's not a straightforward yes or no question. There's a subjective element to that decision making. Now, we've set out our view that because of the poor quality of the existing site, the negative impact it has on the area, that actually the proposal doesn't have a substantial harm on the openness. And I don't think I could really say more on that. In terms of the low rise point, I mean, yes, we have looked at different models and massing models. We wanted to do a proposal here where we concentrated the built form on one part of the site in order to free up as much of the site as possible to go back to the park. So in effect, what you have is you've got a bit of the site which is obviously 7 stories, drops down to 3 stories, and then there's a third of the site where there's no building at all, where there is some building at the moment. So, clearly there's a sort of plus and minus in terms of the built form, and therefore perhaps the harm to the openness you would perceive. Now, we felt that approach was better than, say, for example, having a 3-story building covering all of the site. Now, you might say that was a mistake on our part, but we genuinely felt that was the better approach to actually then be able to give something back to the park. We may agree to disagree on that, but that was our sort of decision-making process.
Thank you. Are there further questions from the committee? If not, I want to thank you very much for your presentation and responses to committee members' questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay. Very good. Can I first of all ask, is there a supporter in the room who lives within 100 metres of the development site? If not, I'll then go on to last but not least, of course. Is there a ward councillor in the room? Yep, please come forward. If I can invite you, councillor, to introduce yourself, confirm your name and the ward that you represent. Once you've done that, I'll indicate you have 3 minutes to make your presentation. At 30 seconds, I'll indicate there's 30 seconds remaining. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Jason Autry, one of the ward members for St Giles, Camberwell. Thanks very much. I won't dwell on the points that have been made by officers and by the objectors. But one thing I will highlight is that I know that this committee concerns itself with material planning considerations, so that's where I'll kick off. So the London plan is really clear. It says that the strongest possible protection should be given to MOL except in very special circumstances. So I struggle to think firstly what this special circumstance here is. It goes on to say that any further development on metropolitan open land should contribute to the physical structure of London by being very distinguishable to the built-up area. I struggle to see how this development does that. It goes on to then say it should create open-air facilities, especially for leisure, recreation, sports and cultural activities. I struggle to see how this application does that. It goes on to say building on metropolitan open land should form part of a green chain. I don't see how this application supports any part of a green chain. And then finally, it should contain features or landscapes that are of importance to the heritage of the area. I can't see how it does that. I think that the key thing that I would note from here is that as part of the 10 material planning considerations, one of them is precedent and previous decisions that are made in planning. And I fear that if this is to be approved, it will set a dangerous precedent. Our view as local councillors is that this development will be overbearing in impact on the entrance of Burgess Park. Firstly, it will pose significant shadows that are projected by height of the building, which will affect the park's nature and, of course, its biodiversity. It will have a negative impact on the wildlife, destroying what we think to be habitat and the ability for bird nesting and, of course, bat roosting. And finally, as a ward councillor, we support that this section of MOL be reintegrated into the park as first envisaged by Councillor Justice Burgess back in the 1940s. So I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Chair. Any questions for Councillor Chair? Councillor Livingstone, thank you. Followed by Councillor Bryan.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to test out a couple of the points that you made there, because you mentioned that this doesn't create space for leisure or for the green chain when the application suggests that a third of the site would become, which is currently brownfield land, would become greenfield space. And you also mentioned harm to bats and birds, where the ecology report here suggests that there isn't any harm to bats and birds. So I just wondered whether you wanted to expand further on those two points.
On just to expand further, starting off with your last point, as of information that we held as ward councillors as far back as January, we were of the understanding that the ecology assessment at the time would have a significant impact on bat roosting and bird nesting. I stand to be corrected on that if that isn't the case, but as of information that we had earlier this year, that certainly was the case. I think in terms of your point in relation to the green chain and it forming a part of the green chain, the fact is that will be broken up quite easily through development of this sort. And so our thinking as ward councillors is that green chain should be maximised to the very maximum of its potential, which is reintegrating it back into the park and having more space, green space created. And if they're able to, gift 1/3 of green space, I can't see why not all of the sites should then be pursued forward for even more green space than the 1/3 that they propose. But I hear your point on the green chain, and our view is that it should be maximised, not minimised.
Thank you, Councillor Livingstone. Councillor Bryan.
Hi, James. Thanks for your
Jason,
sorry, for your presentation. My question kind of follows on a little bit from Richard's. I'm just we're talking about a bit of a mess of a site at the moment. I'm assuming that what you would prefer, if you could wave a magic wand, is for this to be reverted back to part of Burgess Park and be completely green space. Is that correct?
Yes.
How would that be paid for? Who would do that? The site would have to be purchased, I imagine.
Sorry, hold on.
Yeah, well, I'm just...
Hold on.
But I had...
I realise, I know.
Yeah.
questions that emanate from the report, council cannot be expected to answer questions on behalf of the council. Do you have a question that emanates from the report?
Maybe I should be asking the officer. Maybe. All right, I'll leave it. Thanks.
I was happy to give my view on it, but there we are.
No. Can I just, if I may, Councillor Chair, in that case, have you seen slide 10 of the presentation? Maybe could bring up slide 10, Colin, maybe. Slide 10 on our screen, it'd be grateful. Uh, 10, that's the one. Yeah, 10. No, 10. That's the one. I wonder if you've previously seen that mock-up produced by the clients. Can I just be quite clear? That's at the entrance of Burgess Park. It does appear to be quite imposing. If that's the entrance of Burgess Park, would I be correct? Would it look as distinctive and as imposing as this image suggests?
Yeah, it's a bit of a leading question, but yeah, I think so. It suggests that would be the case, and I think that's the importance of why we thought as local councillors and the local community that the local development study was undertaken, because we understand that the built environment in what is the low line of Camberwell needs to be respected and respected sensitively, right? And I think this, particularly in the place that is the entrance of Burgess Park, and might I add, Burgess Park that is heavily used and could do with more space, completely disrespects that in many ways, and in my view would cause unnecessary overshadowing and a disruption to the green space that ought to be protected. I mean, it goes back to material planning considerations, which I know you concern yourself with, and nothing more.
Thank you very much. Are there further questions? If not, thank you, Councillor Chair, for responding to committee questions and for your presentation. Thank you. Could you turn off your mic, please? Could you turn off your mic before you go? I believe there are questions for officers. Yeah, Councillor Nick Johnson. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm intrigued by the suggestion which we've heard both from local council and also from Friends of Burgess Park about reintegrating the site into Burgess Park. I imagine, as Councillor O'Brien has pointed out, that there may be some cost implications with that. I wonder if there was any form of roadmap as to how that might be achieved, or is this sometime, who knows, maybe never, as an ambition?
Yes, thanks for that. The purchase of the site has been considered, so our property team have looked at that. And the view is that's something that we would consider once this planning application has been determined and any appeal has been determined, because that drives the value of the land. So if it were to get a planning permission for residential use, it would probably be worth somewhere in the region of £5 million. If it were to be refused planning permission and not succeed on appeal, it would probably be worth about £1.5 million. And at that point, we would consider negotiating with the owner to see if we could purchase the site, subject to that budget obviously being available to us. But the planning decision and ultimate outcome of any appeal is a key factor in how we approach that.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Who owns the land? I thought it was Metropolitan Open Land. I thought the council would own it.
No, Metropolitan Open Land, like Greenbelt, isn't necessarily owned by the state. So it's a designation, and if you own land privately, you can have your land designated as MOL or Greenbelt.
So could we put a planning application in as a council to have it reverted back to green space?
You can make a planning application if you don't own land, but generally your planning application has to have some prospect of succeeding. And clearly, if we don't own the land, then there wouldn't be much point getting planning permission to change it to a park, because we couldn't implement it.
All righty, thank you. Are there further questions to officers or those who've spoken, presented to us today? Councillor Nick Johnson.
one follow-up question, Colin. Were this application to be rejected, do we know what would happen to the status of the businesses on the site? Does the owner of the business intend to, are they selling and retiring and so the site will become vacant? Or is it that the owner of the site is saying, I wish to sell it, you need to clear out?
I think this is a site where the owner is looking to retire, essentially. But obviously, if they didn't get planning permission, they have an option to carry on renting the site for other uses. So I don't think it would become empty. But you know, that's something that we can't control. But I think it's probably more than likely that if they didn't get planning permission, the site would continue in some commercial use.
Thank you. I suppose it is consideration. Are there any comments members want to make on what you've heard? Any further comments? Of course, Councillor Bryan.
I do believe that the precedent has been set for MOL to be used for residential development. If I remember the Dulwich Hamlets application a year ago, because the ward councillor thought that there wasn't a precedent. I think there is.
It's not the case that previously developed metropolitan open land has never ever been redeveloped somewhere in London. So I mean, the exceptional tests are there. So that if you can make the exception, you can get the recommendation. But in that sense, there isn't a precedent in that sense because you have to make the exceptional case in each case. You can't point to some other site and say, well, it got okayed there. If it got okayed, it was because it was exceptional.
Very good in that case. In that case, and if I may move forward, I will move forward in that case. So I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendation set out in paragraph 1 of the report and page 91 of the agenda pack. Now then, there's a few...
Chair, excuse me.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that where there's a possibility we may have a resolution to refuse, that it's normally referred to the legal officer to warn members about the repercussions of that. And the repercussions are on an application like this, there's a reasonable chance of us facing an appeal. And if the council has been seen to act unreasonably, then there's a chance of an order of costs against the council. So, as I say, it's always appropriate at this stage for me to remind members about that and to give a warning about the possibility of costs if it's held that the council are acting unreasonably. Having said that, in this particular case, it is MOL. The applicant's entirely right that it's a site which is used for a scrapyard at the moment, so it's unsightly. But the fact remains it is metropolitan open land. You've therefore got the very clear message both in the London plan and in the MPPF that it's inappropriate development. And from that point of view, it's a question of you to come up with weigh the usual planning balance and decide whether or not this is a substantial effect on the openness of the rest of the MOL. There have been a number of planning appeals in respect of MOL over the last few years. And if you look at the planning inspectorate or even court decisions, quite a number of those have come before for a decision. And it seems to be the case that if there's a local authority which is falling considerably behind on its housing delivery test, then that might be considered very special circumstances. And I've seen a number of planning inspectorate decisions where a local authority is perhaps only meeting 20% of its housing delivery test. Now, the fact is, London Borough of Southwark has had an examination in public earlier this year, as you're aware. The housing delivery test was something that was considered in that. The inspectorate came up with a percentage figure which the council challenged. The council leader wrote to the planning inspectorate at the end of March, challenging the figures and in fact showing that the council was very, very close to meeting its housing delivery test. And therefore, I would say to you that, in my view, the risk of a costs award against the council is minimal in this case. And I think it would be difficult to see that on a planning appeal, where we have such a recent housing delivery test confirmed, and even the inspectorate's view challenged, I think it's going to be a little bit of a difficult one for an appeal to be successful. So whilst in previous cases we've always at this stage given a very strong warning and a concern about the possibility of costs, I'm perhaps taking a more relaxed view in this particular case in view of what's happened recently with the new Southwark plan, and it's so recently been examined in public, and the decision of the inspector and the fact that that plan is almost certainly going to be adopted in February by our full council. I hope that's, I don't know if members have got any queries in relation to what I've said there, but thank you, Chair.
Invite any comments? Yep. That's fine. That's fine. And I'm just, it's still there. That slide 10 is the most telling for me. I'm familiar with Burgess Park. This tall building at the entrance within the curtilage of Burgess Park, Metropolitan Open Land, seems to me wholly inappropriate. And going through the exceptions, this is no way does it comply with the exceptions that are laid out in the NPPF. So I'm happy to proceed with the motion. Agreed. Okay. So in that case, and I would like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendation and set out in paragraph 1 of the report and page 91 of the main agenda pack. And of course, note the comments and amendments made in the addendum. Okay. That planning permission be refused, subject to the referral of the application to the Greater London Authority. Is there a member who wishes to second the motion? Councillor Nick Johnson. I'll do this by usual roll, just because remember that I've got the right names here. So I'll start with Councillor Nick Johnson. Are you for, against, or abstain the motion?
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Livingstone, for, against, abstain the motion.
On balance, for, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Margie Newen, for, against, abstain the motion.
The motion to refuse the application.
Yes, for. Yeah.
I am for the
you.
motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify that?
Oh.
Language can be a tricky thing.
Double negative.
Well, I know that you've got some legal training as well. That's why about it, but okay, yes, indeed, you need to clarify.
I'd like to clarify, yes.
You are
On reflection, I am for the motion to reject the
Indeed.
application. Thank you, Chair. Apologies for that confusion.
No, that's fine. And as long as the legal officer approves, then fine. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
I'm not sure why you seconded the
Well, you know, I was processing it, don't you worry. By the way, Councillor Damon O'Brien, for, against, or abstain the motion.
For the motion, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bill Williams, for, against, or abstain the motion.
For, Chair.
Have I missed someone else? Yeah, Councillor. Oh, I got there. Councillor, I'm trying to get the names right. Councillor John Hartley, are you for, against, abstain the motion?
I'm also for the motion, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I've got the others. And I'm Councillor Martin Seaton, and I'm for the motion. The motion carried unanimously. Thank you all those who have made a contribution to this committee meeting, and I wish you well and stay safe out there. Thank you and good evening.